These super memory people, they remember everything in vivid detail. Where we forget what we had for breakfast yesterday, they can remember what their favorite Tuesday is and choose 1972 because it was a really pretty day and they wore this dress that they liked a lot and had a really good salad. Okay, nothing that was a big event or anything in particular, just something really small when we struggle to remember what we ate for breakfast. So then you have you have implicit memories, and these are not really part of your conscious. They're formed through your behaviors. So if you're like me, I haven't ridden a bike in years, but if I got on a bike, I would know how to do it. It might take me a minute to kind of get my balance back, but I don't really have to think about how to ride a bike because that memory is there because it's formed through behavioral. It's that procedural memory. Your actions, your skills, tying your shoes, driving, all of those are behaviors learned through that action. Okay. So then the example says you might have a fear of spiders, but consciously do not remember why. So something probably happened to cause you to be fearful of spiders. You don't really know why. You just know you're scared of them, and you don't really care sometimes to know why you're scared of them. When we look at retrieval, we look at how you get that memory back out of storage. Okay. And there's several different ways that we can bring it back to consciousness. So one way would be through recall. So we're able to just access it without having to have cues that are going to be able to come back. So a multiple test choice would give us cues that would help us to remember, whereas an essay test, there's no cues, and so we're able to just recall the information. Recognition we typically use on a multiple choice test because we have 4 answers, at least options typically, and we can make that decision. Well, this one doesn't look familiar at all, so I'll get rid of it. These 2 look familiar. That one, not really, so I'm going to pick this one because it looks the most familiar. We recognize it. And then you have relearning. And so relearning is information that you've already learned at one point, but then you have to relearn it, or you kind of have to bring it back. So after you've learned Spanish in high school, it may be difficult for you to speak it, but after a while, if you relearn it, you will learn it quicker than you did the first time. So then we've talked about the parts of the brain that deal with memory. So look over them in the book, and then chapter 3 will have all of those. And we talked about the neurotransmitters in chapter 3 as well. So look at those. They all help with memory. But the one we want to talk about today is the arousal theory. This is where you have your strong emotions are going to trigger and form strong memories, whereas weak emotion experiences are going to form weaker memories. And so that's some of the reasons, some of the theories of why we have memories, because there was strong emotion tied to it. So we remember 9/11 because there was a lot of emotion that happened, and so we remember that. But we don't remember a Tuesday where it was pretty outside and we ate a salad because there wasn't a strong memory with that. There wasn't a big emotional experience, and so it's harder for us to remember. So flashbulb memories, this is going to be a record of a typical or unusual event that happens. Okay, so in our homework assignment, we're using 9/11, but anyone can have a flashbulb memory over anything. We're just using one that the whole world experienced, and so we can get a better thing. Because not everybody's going to remember when I got married or whenever you had your first kiss, but everybody has a better chance of remembering something global. Okay, so it's something that really depends on how old we were when it happened, if we were interested in it, and we can remember wild things like exactly where we were at, what we were doing, maybe even to the point of what we were wearing that day, even if it was 20 plus years ago. Okay, so it may depend on a cultural reference or a personal investment. So those can be different things, but 9/11 does have the most recent flashbulb memory that has been researched extensively. So people can recall a personal situation and their whereabouts in a flashbulb memory. The recall is extremely long lasting. We can remember these days, these events, much more vivid, feel those same feelings than we can normal things. So if you want to think of your wedding or your first kiss or the first time you drove a car or your most embarrassing moment, those are going to have those real feelings. We kind of rehearse them more often, so that's why they think that we have them imprinted on our cerebral cortex a little bit different. And so they're often most rehearsed and the most reviewed. I encourage you to watch this video. It's kind of hard to watch because it's the actual footage. They were just messing around with their camcorder and caught the planes crashing. It's pretty heartbreaking to see. All right, you can come back and see this. 97% of people can remember where they were on 9/11 if they were over the age of 8. Here's just a chart that shows you some of the other flashbulb memories that people might have. When Osama bin Laden was killed, Nixon resigned, the OK City bombing. Now, a lot of these have to do with how old you were. So how old you were at the event. Well, I was alive for the Oklahoma City bombing, and I was in elementary school, but I don't really know what I was doing. I don't have a flashbulb memory. I have a very vague memory because it didn't make sense to me, and I didn't know. But I was alive for 9/11, and I do vividly remember where I was at and everything I was doing because I was older. Okay, your physical proximity to the event. As someone in New York will remember 9/11 more vividly than we will in Texas, or even someone in Africa. They may remember it. It might be something that was shocking and awe to the whole world because nothing like this had happened to America, but we're going to remember it more because it happened on our home soil. Your personal connection to the event, where you were at, if it was close to you. Like I said, people in New York are going to have a different view of this than people who were not in New York, maybe Florida. My best friend's dad was a pilot for American Airlines, and he was supposed to be flying one of the planes that crashed, and they didn't know he called in sick that day. So she has a very vivid memory because there was a personal connection. Your empathy toward the event, how connected you were emotionally, how sad, how you felt, if you were donating time, resources, whatever it was, money, that could change your memory. Rehearsal and reviewing, we see this every 9/11. We watch these videos over and over again. And so that helps to instill the memories in our brain, and even the length of time. Right now, it's been 20-something years, and so we still remember it very vividly. So then there's amnesia. We have different types of amnesia, but amnesia can be caused by several different reasons. Disease, physical trauma, psychological trauma. There's all different things that can cause amnesia, and no two cases of amnesia will be the same. So just because someone has a certain type of amnesia, we can't say in 3 days you'll fully recover and everything will be normal. We don't know. Every case is different. So there are two common types. You have anterograde amnesia and retrograde. Anterograde is the inability to remember new information after a point of trauma. Think about the movie 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore is in an accident. She cannot create new memories. Her last memory is the memory of her accident or the day before her accident. So in order for her to have a life, she watches a video to catch her up every single day so that she can live and know what her life looks like. And it's a beautiful life. Retrograde amnesia is the loss of memory, or partial or even complete, for events that occurred prior to the trauma. So The Vow is another really good example of this with Channing Tatum and Rachel McAdams. It's a really beautiful story of a couple who was madly in love, and they were married for about 12 years. And prior to them getting married, she was engaged to another man. And she met Channing Tatum and fell in love with him, and they ran off and created a beautiful life together. Well, she had an accident, and she couldn't remember the years that they were married. And all she could remember was being engaged to her former fiance. And so the whole movie is about her husband trying to remind her and date her and show her their beautiful life. And so she has to try to learn and remember things. And I won't spoil the movie for you, but I do recommend you watching both of those to get an idea of anterograde amnesia and retrograde amnesia. Then we have dissociative. This is the psychogenic component. And this is memory loss due to psychological pain or extreme amount of stress or conflict or even trauma, psychological trauma that's happening. And so this is when somebody could be just overwhelmed and be heading in one direction and then just wake up somewhere else and not know who they were, how they got there, what's going on. And a lot of people just don't believe it. They don't think it can be real, but our brain does some incredible things to try to protect us from trauma. And so they're not usually lying. They typically don't get that memory lapse back. One guy had watched a study over, it had happened to him before and he never got his memory back, but he just kind of went on national news. Someone knew him. They called him back and he went back to his life and tried to live it over, tried to figure out what happened. Infantile amnesia says that we don't remember things before the age of 2 or 3, and mostly because our brain's not developed enough. Okay, so memory is pretty sporadic until 3 to 5. Alcohol-related amnesia, these would be blackouts. The brain has a hard time transferring short-term to long-term memory with alcohol being impairment, and so there's blackouts. We don't remember those. In-block blackouts are going to be the inability to recall any details from the events while intoxicated. And again, it's the ability to transfer short-term memory to long-term memory. It's blocked. And then fragmentary blackouts, the inability to recall fragments of details. And so you may remember things, but in different pieces. And so you kind of have to piece the parts together. And that's just due to partial blockage. So think of maybe the hangover. I know that drugs were included in that, but they can't really remember their night. And so they kind of have to piece it together from all the different crazy events that are revealed to them. So memory construction is really interesting. You're able to form new memories with construction, but reconstruction is the process of bringing up old memories. And so we can retrieve them, but sometimes we unintentionally alter them. Now, it's not malicious that's happening. We just sometimes can have a distortion in what we were thinking or doing, and that can be what alters it. So sometimes we think we were somewhere with our best friend because we're always with our best friend, and then we're telling the story and we said it was our best friend and our friend is like, no, I wasn't there. Then we realize we were there with our sister and not our best friend because we're usually with our best friend, and we knew it was a female, and so our brain just said, oh, it was your best friend and it was really your sister. So we have these inaccuracies or these distortions. So it's something that, again, is not malicious, but just can be reconstructed. My memory of 9/11, I drove to school, but then I rode the bus home. And I've told this story millions of times to people what my experience was. And no one ever asked what happened to my car. I always tell them how I had a flat tire and I drove to school. And then later I was on the school bus, super excited I didn't have to go to work that night because the mall was going to close. But I never knew where my car was. Well, what happened is my brain just kind of filled it in. Well, you rode the bus a lot. You were sitting in a way that maybe you were riding the bus. And so your brain just said you were riding the bus talking to your other friend who rode the bus every day. When now that I've looked at it, I'm thinking maybe I didn't ride the bus and I was just sitting on the chair leaning over it like I would the school bus. And because it was the person I was talking to who rode the bus every day, I thought that it was me. Okay, so that's that suggestibility. It's the effects of misinformation from external sources that lead to certain creation of false memories. So people can claim to remember something that was only a suggestion that someone made. So we've learned that this power of suggestion is really powerful and that memories really are fragile and vulnerable. And so this has been something that's very important to study for the role of suggestibility, especially in eyewitness testimonies, because countless people have gone to prison based on someone's testimony because they thought that they saw something, but really they got their memory confused whenever they looked at a mug book. Looking at those mug books over and over can tend to distort our memory, and then we can falsely accuse someone.